The following program is presented by the Metropolitan Library Service Agency.
Hello, welcome to All About Kids, a program focusing on the interests of children and young people and some of the issues affecting them. Our guest today is Michael Scott, a musician, an educator, and a doctoral student in the School of Music at the University of Minnesota. Michael will discuss a special program sponsored by the U, Tuning Children In. We'll go on location to Anderson School and Bethune School in Minneapolis and watch graduate students in the music department at the U performing for a young audience. Michael, it's a pleasure to have you here today on All About Kids. And as a doctoral student at the University of Minnesota, you have a past that has included a lot of working with young people, both in elementary schools, secondary schools, and now you're working on your doctoral program, but you're also doing a lot of work in the community with youngsters to help introduce a variety of music to them. Describe the program that you're in.
Well, this program is called Tuning Children In. And I hesitate to use the word targeting, but we're targeting children who've been noticed as kids at risk, children who are having a difficult time or potentially are going to have a difficult time dealing with the structures of public school. And what we're trying to do is give them another opportunities, other roads in which they can follow and maybe experience, so that when they finally do get through their program, get through their elementary school into high school and so on, that they'll have some other choices, some other ideas of opportunities that they can take advantage of when they finally get done, or even while they're in school, for that matter.
Well, you're working with fairly young children, third graders, and sometimes we think of third graders as not having the least bit of interest in anything but very popular music or themes from the current Disney films.
Right.
And yet you are taking some very sophisticated music into their classrooms.
Well, the reason why they probably don't have much experience, well, what is this? They don't have the experience with classical music, with some of these different ensembles that I've had brought into the schools. And so this is just an opportunity for them to see and hear these. And I think once they do see and hear them, they'll realize that these are interesting to see too. And also, and I really stress the word see, because they usually only hear this sort of thing. When we watch TV, whether we're looking at commercials or television programs or movies, we're all pretty much involved in what's going on visually on the screen. Some of us who are musicians will also listen to the music more so maybe than the average person. But the ensembles that I'm bringing in for the kids to see are pretty much the same type of sounds that you hear on television and commercials and in the movies. String quartets, string orchestras, jazz quintets, jazz quartets, even homogeneous groups such as trombone quartet and that sort of thing. I've heard quite a bit on in the media.
Only we don't think of that. I think in a few minutes we're going to take a look at some footage in a couple of the schools that you're working in, and the children seem to be just astounded when the groups would play music that they recognize, the theme from Aladdin or the theme from Jaws, and to see the instruments that were actually making that music, not just an audio cassette or a CD or something. The kids didn't seem to have an awareness that real instruments created this kind of music.
Well, not even real instruments, but real people too.
Real people.
They have no idea that there are people behind it. I mean, I remember when I first went to hear a symphony orchestra. I'm from Rochester, New York, and the Rochester Philharmonic Orchestra is one of the finest orchestras in the country. And when they started playing, I don't remember the specific piece, but the first thing I thought of was, this is like the movies. This is like TV. This sounds just like what I'm used to hearing on TV, and I'd never really connected the two before.
I think one of the fascinating things, too, the musicians are young, and they were very willing to talk to the kids about their background. And one of the funny episodes was when some student wanted to know how old each one was, and they were very young, in their 20s, and the kids obviously thought of those as being quite mature.
Yes, very old.
But the curiosity and the willingness of the musicians to talk to the children in a way that engaged the kids in conversation. When you developed this program, you worked with other people at the university and you got some funding from some local companies.
Mm-hmm. Yes, the University of Minnesota has graciously kicked in about 20% or so of the funding, and then American Express, IDS Financial Services, put up the rest of the money for the program.
It's a good example of public-private collaboration. I think often when we hear about programs that serve special needs in the community, it's much more focused on crime prevention or violence prevention, and your program is a much happier, a much more cheerful way of bringing something into children's lives.
And also, I think you see a vested interest then too. I mean, the corporations are beginning to look at and see that they need to take really take an interest and a vested interest in education. You know, there's the movement that some people are not quite sure whether it's valid or not, but this movement of corporations taking over and running public schools. And I know that, for that matter, I think something like that's happened here in Minneapolis, and there have been several other examples around the country. What they're looking at is they're looking at their workforce down the road, and they're looking to see that there should be a sense of training or a sense of connection with the students even when they're very young.
I think something interesting is also happening at the university. There seems to be much more awareness that the university needs to go out into the community and start developing skills at all different levels. The Consortium on Children, Youth, and Families, for instance, is very interested in sharing research about children and their families in ways that people in the real world can apply to their lives. And obviously, this is something that the School of Music, which perhaps is thought of as somewhat esoteric, can make an impact in the community.
Well, I think the magic word there is the real world. And the university's always been considered a sort of a glass world, and in a lot of cases an ivory tower. And it really is not, because the university is filled with people who we come in for a very short time. I mean, we really are fairly itinerant, fairly temporary, and then once we leave, we go back out in the real world to try and make a living, and in a lot of cases to try and make a difference, especially if you're going to be a public school teacher or a public school music teacher, more so than say some of the people we're going to see who are going to be performers and playing in symphony orchestras and the like.
I think too, for programs like music in the public schools that are somehow not always considered part of the important core curriculum, this kind of a program shows that the private sector is interested in seeing to it that children have music experiences, and therefore the bureaucracy might tend to think of it as being worthy of keeping in the budget and continuing to expand so that children have that part of their lives.
Oh, I would think so. When I take a look at these students, and I realize that not all of them, and most of them, are not going to be professional musicians, but if they have a really quality experience in music all the way through, then some of these kids are going to grow up to become parents who send their children to school and who are going to want their children to have that same experience, even more. Some of them are going to grow up to be principals, some of them are going to grow up to be teachers, and so they're going to be colleagues for the music teachers in the schools. And if they remember a good experience, then they're going to be, I think, a lot more open and work a lot more easier and quickly with the music teacher. And also, even more importantly, some of these students are going to grow up to be school board members. And school boards, in a lot of cases, tend to have their hands, if not on the purse strings, at least on the policies and the direction in which the programs are going. And again, if they can have a really fine experience when they were younger, they're going to bring that to whatever board they happen to be sitting on, whatever decision-making group that they have to be working with, and that can only be to the advantage of the program, and especially the music program.
Wanting to share that. Well, let's go to Anderson School now and watch your. What was the name of the group? I'm sorry, I forgot. The group that performed at Anderson.
At Anderson, this was the Liberace Trio, and it's a chamber trio of violin, cello, and piano.
And watch them with the youngsters, and the expression on those children's faces is terrific.
Okay. Remember, an idiophone is any instrument that if you strike, if it's a piece of wood, you strike against itself, it makes a sound. Remember what could be idiophones? So your hands can be idiophones, your feet against the floor can be idiophones. If I play against the blackboard, that can be an idiophone.
Make a screech with that.
Okay. How many fingernails? And what's the last instrument? Remember, it starts with an M. Membranophone. And what would a membranophone be? What would we know what a membranophone is today? If we went to a band concert or an orchestra concert?
Something that you shake and it makes noise.
No, that's an idiophone.
Something that you pound. Something that you
All right, okay, wait a minute. What do you pound on?
A drum.
Say it again.
A drum.
Say it again.
A drum.
A drum is a membranophone.
If we have any drums, we can do a drum roll.
Okay.
This is Jennifer Needleman and Rebecca Keekanat. We're all music majors over at the University of Minnesota. We're just going to start out. We're going to play the last movement of a Haydn G major trio before we talk more about ourselves. It's called the Rondo in the Gypsy style. And you'll find out later in the piece there are little rhythms and stuff. Do you want to play one of the Gypsy type rhythms? Sure.
What's going to be in the gypsy?
Well, we're all going to be gypsies because we all have kind of syncopated rhythms and
Yeah, you'll get
stuff like
ideas.
this.
Sounds like it.
Things like that. And, not really very Haydnish. And also, have you ever heard the term rondo before? If a piece is in a rondo form, yeah. Well, rondo means that there's one theme that keeps on coming back throughout the piece. And you can listen for that theme, which is...
Which is?
And that comes back probably 6 or 7 times throughout the whole piece. So now we have the finale, rondo in the gypsy style of Haydn.
It's just wonderful to see the stillness of that audience that had been wiggling terribly before when the music started, and how they just responded so to the performer's total absorption in their music. How do you pick the kinds of things that you're going to share with children?
Actually, I let the groups pick their own music. I think they have a better sense of what they're going to be doing, and I've also explained to them the age group of the students that they're going to be working with. And just using their own experience and their own feel, they decide what they think will work best and what will make them sound best, and also will allow them to speak very easily about the music and so on at if not a certain level, but at a certain sophistication that the students can understand, appreciate.
When you're working with the school in this program, do you get some input from the music teachers in those classes you're going to be performing?
This is really a comprehensive program, and we do both music teachers at both schools where this project has been, the site of this project, have been involved in the planning and also the implementation of some of the curriculum, the type of instrumentation that they wanted to see or thought would be interesting for the students also.
And are they kind of excited at the idea of the university providing an enrichment or enhancement to the program that they're able to provide?
I think so. Anytime that you can see, actually one of the music teachers told me that anytime an interesting program comes up and there's an opportunity to be involved in it, they just grab it, and just very quickly, because as we know today with budget cuts and funding and things like that, especially for city programs and so on, it's very difficult to give students, again, a wide variety of experiences of what goes on out in the real world and so on. I just also wanted to say that another side of this is that the students now are looking at not only professional musicians, but they're looking at students also. They're looking at college students. And hopefully this will give them an idea that this is something that they can be involved in also, that this is that the college way is the way to go also.
Well, and one of the questions that one of the children asked, which we don't have on tape, was, how old were you when you started playing? And I think the children were kind of fascinated. Some of the musicians had started when they were 5 years old, and some had started at 8, some at 12, and just the idea that you can learn no matter what age you are. And that seemed to be very intriguing to the third graders, that they could start now or they could start later. What kind of an impression has this experience made on the university students going in to explain their music and to perform as a children's services librarian? This is a hard audience to perform before. Right.
Yes, I think this is an opportunity for the student musicians to get out in the schools and experience what it's like to work with the kids before they get a chance to do it as student teachers. There are several programs within the School of Music which allow students to go in maybe one day or 2 days just to get a feel of it. And also about this time of the year when the schools are done with their programs, the School of Music tends to bring groups from different districts in, and the music education students work with the kids and their groups also.
We've had a look at one program which was at Anderson School in Minneapolis, and a very different musical group performed or worked with the students at Bethune School in Minneapolis. And describe a little bit about the group that's working with the children at Bethune, and then we'll take a look at their performance.
Okay. The group that went to Bethune is called the Four Voices String Quartet. And I just wanted to, just let you know that I didn't just bring string groups in to perform for the students. I had basically 3 different groups perform at each school, and each group came twice, 1 week apart, from one session to the other. I had 2 jazz quintets perform also, and a trombone quartet, in addition to the two string-oriented groups. I played in the trombone quartet.
That's your instrument. So the children really are, it's not a one-shot deal. They're really developing a much more expanded awareness of a variety of instruments.
I think so, and when the children knew that the groups were coming back, they were able to then ask some questions and say, can you tell me about this when you come back next time? Or can you bring another example of something when you come back next time? Or can you play this tune next time? With one of the jazz groups, they said, well, play some blues. And one child said, well, do you know specifically this blues? I think it was like, do you know St. Louis blues, and so on. And the group was able to work it up for next time and play it next time.
And that fascinates the children, too, to think that it can be done. Well, let's take a look at the footage from Bethune School and not compare, but just look at the difference.
Okay.
1700s. Now this violin was made way back in 1742, so it's a really old violin. But now they're made, people have continued to make them all over the place. Ramona plays on a viola that was made in the United States and was made just 20 years ago. And Becca plays on a cello that was made in England 100 years ago. So they're made all over the place. Now Ramona, one of you guys is going to tell us about the bow.
Okay, this is the bow. And it's called a bow because it's a little bit like a bow and arrow. It has a piece of wood right here. And this is also very special wood. It's from South America, and it's called Pernambuco wood. And it's special because it's very, very hard. And the other part is this white part here. Does anyone know what this is made of? Right.
Can you see it now?
See, you guys knew that. All right, and there's some things to make the bow look pretty right here. And that's made from an oyster shell. It's mother of pearl. And that's just for decoration. But you need to have the horsehair to make the sound. Is there anything else we can do?
Which instrument do you think is the lowest one?
That one.
This one?
No, that one.
That one? How come?
What's it called?
Because it's the biggest.
Right.
Right.
So, and what's the difference between her strings and my strings? They're thicker and they're longer. So listen to this. When I make my top string, my thinnest string, real short, it gets really long. This goes really long.
Much lower.
So that's how it works. And Ramona's, listen to me. I'll play all my strings. Hear how each one got lower? That's how they designed the instruments. Well, You want to play the next piece?
Yeah.
Oh,
Sure.
now we've got a story to tell you guys. Now, in this story, we use our instruments to help me tell the story. This is my story of how I got up and what I did this morning. And all the instruments are going to play special effects to help you guys to imagine what I saw and what I heard this morning when I took a walk and after I got up and everything, okay? So the story starts out, and I was in bed, and what do you think happened when I was in bed?
You go sleep.
Something woke me up. You know? Yeah, so then I turned it off, and then I got up and I got dressed. I guess I didn't turn it off well. And then I got up and I got dressed, and I went outside and I took a morning walk. And the first thing that I heard when I went out the door were little birds, because it was early in the morning. So some of the birds were like this. And I was near a lake, so some of the other birds were like this. Like seagulls, right? And then some birds were familiar birds. You recognize that one? Uh-huh. And then I went a little farther, and what do you think I saw? Some little kittens in the alley. And suddenly a pack of dogs came by. And scared the cats away. And then I walked a little farther and was out at the street, and there were lots of traffic and cars going by. And the light turned and I crossed the street and I walked a little farther. And what do you think I came upon? This is out near the country, so I came to a pasture. And who do you think was in the pasture eating grass? Yeah, you hear it? So then I walked a little farther and got away from that big cow, and I went near a pond. And what do you think was in the pond? Does that sound like a frog? Okay, and then I went a little farther, and I was back in the neighborhood. And I walked by this house with a little old granny sitting on the porch. And she's rocking in a rocking chair, back and forth. And suddenly this little dog ran out into the road, and the car honked at it, but it was too late. And the car hit the dog. So then the little granny ran inside, and she dialed 911. And the ambulances came. And they fixed the dog up, and everyone lived happily ever after. So that's it.
The kids loved that story. It was just fun to watch their expressions. But it was really obvious when you talked to the children before the group started to describe what it was going to do, that you developed a really good rapport with the children, and they remembered the things that you talked to them before about, so that this little performance wasn't just sort of dropped on them. They had some awareness of what went into it.
Well, the part that we just saw was really the second part, the second phase of the program. The first phase occurred back in September and October, and actually into November, where I went into the schools and I taught several classes. Pretty much introduced the students to the different families of instruments, using maybe some more technical names, but I thought also some names which would be very interesting. Use the terms aerophones, idiophones, membranophones, and chordophones, and these are families of instruments that maybe ethnologists or ethnomusicologists use to describe many different instruments, whether they be instruments of other cultures or instruments of this culture or instruments of Western European art music. Just about every instrument will fit into one of those categories there.
And the kids remembered those terms.
Yes, I think they did, because they're always interesting names to deal with. Aerophone is fairly easy to pick up that it's an instrument that you blow through. A chordophone also. The idiophone is a little different, but what the kids like about the fact is they can call it the idiot phone, and that's another way they can remember it also. And of course the membranophone would be a drum.
One of the other fun things was watching the teachers who were there with the students, and they were enjoying these performances just as much as the kids were. And obviously they were picking up ideas that they could probably use in their classes later on.
Well, again, these are experiences that even a lot of the teachers may not have had. also, or may not have had up this close, and so
Well,
on.
and Dave Lindemann, who was the photographer, and I certainly learned all kinds of things when we were watching too. So it is, again, that expansion for everyone who's involved.
Well, that's part of what we're looking for, is also to teach the children a little bit of ideas of critical thinking, because music is really an important part of that, especially when you're talking about classical music and the structures of the music and how you put it together. Also, when it comes time to even playing a musical instrument, a lot of the students expressed an interest in learning how to play an instrument. And when I had the members of the groups, the student musicians talk, they not only talked about when they first started playing the instrument, but also their practice habits, the practice incentives in some cases when they were younger, and what it took to get over the hump of having to just come in and practice before you could do something else. Some people had their parents put cookies out on the piano, M&Ms. In my own case, my brothers and I couldn't go outside and play until after we practiced. You know, and it was a half hour one night. If we missed it, it was an hour the next night, and so on.
So you're sort of learning a self-discipline,
I think so.
And I think we focus so much on the training that you need if you're going to go into sports, the practice. No one seems to mind 3 or 4 practices a week for baseball or hockey, but I think for some students the idea of practicing to learn how to play an instrument doesn't have quite the same immediate effect. And I as a parent, as a person who sees a lot of young people, I think that we tend to over-focus on sports practice and not enough perhaps on things like this.
Well, I think we tend to over-focus pretty much on the end result anyway, and not in the work that goes involved, that is involved.
That there can be a great deal of satisfaction when you perfect something, and it doesn't need to be done instantly, that it takes a while.
Yeah, and actually the way we develop, whether it's being a musician or even whether you're in sports and so on, because I did that also, I was a track team and also played a little football too, is that we learn in increments, and or as we like to call them, plateaus. And when you reach a new plateau, all of a sudden you're really very excited about some things. I have an 11-year-old private trombone student who a couple of weeks ago discovered the difference between an eighth note and a quarter note. And as I played it for him, he just said to me, well, you slowed down when you got to the quarter notes. And we put it on a metronome, and I didn't. And he realized the difference between the two, and he was excited. He said, wow, that's so cool. So, and he's reached it, so he's now on a new level. And he will continue to develop that way, and I think we all develop that way. And I think with these students, we're trying to get across the idea that you can do this. It's going to take some time, but there are rewards along the way. There's a lot of fun along the way, too.
It's a wonderful program, Michael, and thank you very much for describing it for us today on All About Kids.
Well, thank you for having me.
It's wonderful to watch the children so entranced by the music and to see the musicians so at ease with the youngsters. Thank you, Michael Scott, the musical groups, and the students of Anderson and Bethune School. Thanks to all of you for joining us on All About Kids. Please tune in again.
This has been a presentation of Hennepin County Library in conjunction with the Twin Cities Metropolitan Library Service Agency. We thank you for watching, and we hope you visit your public library often.